All right. I believe we're live right now. Might be still figuring out a little bit of audio stuff. Mr. Blonde, can you hear me?
I sure can, brother. How you doing?
Sweet. All right. Today I brought in Mr. Blonde, another sharp friend of mine. Really respect his opinion, so I'm sure you guys will get some value out of his takes. Okay, sorry. First fight of the night. Okay. We've got Charles Johnson versus Ramazan Temirov. Mr. Blonde. Oh, wait, that's actually my bad. I've got the stream open. My fault. Okay. Ramazan Temirov, I'll let you take it away. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Mr. Blonde.
We talked about it last time we got together. I was initially, like, pre-tape, kind of high on Charles Johnson here. Like, I was pretty bearish on Temirov heading into his debut versus Vergara. I taped him again heading into this one, and he's more impressive to me on a second watch, I think. But he really doesn't have a good comparable to Charles Johnson on his record at all. His best tests have all been guys looking to wrestle him. He's a blitz and recharge guy, and he's really, really short, small, right? So when I think about it and picture the fight, I don't have like the greatest view of it, but I see him, coming forward, looking to use his athleticism, his reflexes to time, multi-punch, hook flurries as he does. And if he hits pay dirt early, I can't rule out him knocking out Charles Johnson. But more likely than not, I would think Charles Johnson could survive a rough spot or two early. And then how do the minutes get filled when Temirov's not just bombing off, right? Because he hasn't really shown like an ability to do it in a sustained fashion for 10, 15 minutes, especially with a guy who can strike, a guy who can wrestle, a guy who's got good cardio and good experience. So I don't read much into his resume, to be honest with you. He hasn't shown me like a very robust, deep game at all. But I'm also willing to acknowledge that he might have more tricks up his sleeve than he's shown, because what he's done has kind of worked for him in the matchups that he's had. And just generally, just being like a striking fan, I don't love, athletic or not, I don't love a little short guy closing distance on a taller guy without the use of a jab. Just charging in with lead power seems like it's got a lot of room for error to me. And Charles Johnson isn't a slick counterpuncher. He's not really a counterpuncher at all, but he is a solid striker, right? So I just see it being, Temirov in spots coming forward, trying to be as effective as he can be. And then when he slays back to recharge, usually he utilizes a lot of lateral movement. He effectively shuts down the distance that way. And I think Charles Johnson's going to come forward, and it's not going to be to wrestle necessarily, though if Temirov gets tired, the playbook I think is kind of open. I think it'll be to strike, and I haven't really seen Temirov face that kind of test. So I'm not uber confident in it. I took Charles Johnson small at plus 120, which I think is about as good a price as was available. And I'll look to play him live if it's going the way I can picture it going. Would love your 2 cents on it, because I know you were kind of pre-tape on it last we chatted about it.
Yeah, so to me, I still lean Charles Johnson for sure. Just there's not tons of evidence that Temirov's a gasser, but just the archetypal, short guy, super steroided up, swinging as hard as he can on everything. There's very little finesse. It's all just power, everything all the time. That type of guy generally slows down in fights. Yeah. And if there's one thing you can say about Charles Johnson is that he never slows down. He can push hard through 5 rounds. He was outpacing Josh Van, who to me is one of the best pace guys, finished him in round 3. So yeah, I kind of see there was some fights in LFA as well. I can't remember exactly which ones it was, but there were some fights on the regional scene where Charles Johnson had to deal with some really hyper aggressive strikers coming at him, trying to take his head off. And he does a pretty good job keeping his cool. He's got a good chin. I think he could get hit. And my issue with betting Charles Johnson here at this price is in round 1, there's a pretty good chance he gets hit with something really hard, right? Like there's a pretty good chance he gets whacked. And then you have to play the game of, does he get knocked out? A, And B, is that enough of a moment to steal a round? So like I could see Temirov actually winning round 1 at a really high clip, considering that Charles doesn't give a shit about winning round 1 in general either. He's happy to build into a fight, give up round 1, really start fighting halfway through round 2. But yeah, so I don't have anything here. I think live bet is a really good shout, though. I think that's probably the way to do it. Sit, watch round 1. Hopefully Temirov lands something big and can kind of buzz Charles. But I see him ultimately working his way back into the fight and winning a decision. What do you think about the total here? I was kind of thinking about an over potentially.
What's the price?
-2, it's a little over -200. Let me check.
I'll tell you this while you're looking at it. Like a couple of years, maybe not even a couple of years, a couple of fights ago, like I was of the opinion that I wouldn't pick anybody in the UFC or anybody at 125 in any promotion to finish Charles Johnson. I think he's a legitimate competitor. His cardio is good. Even if you buzz him, that can happen. He seems like a resilient sort who's going to stay in a fight. And a couple of things have happened that would make me question that some, but not today. I would think he'd be resilient enough to persevere in the face of a multi-hook assault. And even like versus Vergara, he absolutely hit him with a great left hook to start that salvo, and he stayed on him. And good for him. It probably took 25 shots, full force to the head and body to get him out of there. So again, even power on regional scene translating to UFC versus world-class durable guys, I'm a little not convinced. Again, don't have the best image of the fight, but I think there's a lot more room for error or downside with Temirov than Charles Johnson. Just my 2 cents.
No, I agree with you. I think the main way I see it finishing would be Temirov smoking him in round 1.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Shout out to everybody in here. Yeah, Mr. Blonde, not blonde. Okay.
Yeah, not blonde.
All right, next fight, we've got Andrea Lee versus JJ Aldrich.
Yeah.
I don't have tons to say on this one. It feels like a type of fight that goes the distance at a really high clip, and I'm sure the odds reflect that. Let me see. Yeah, wow. Over 2.5, pushing -600. Yeah, I don't see any value there, that's for sure. But this is just going to be a pitter-patter outside striking fight. If I have to guess a winner, I'm going with the girl who's slightly less washed, JJ Aldrich, to me. Like, she's still at her peak athleticism as far as I can see versus Andrea Lee kind of tapering off now pretty hard. But yeah, I don't know. Andrea's she's good to pump volume. She's reliable to go forward and do her little jab. She's not a whole lot of a nuance to her game, but I don't really know. I don't really have a good read on the money line here at all. It just feels like a potentially close decision with small margins. What are you thinking?
Yeah, similar. So historically, I've kind of been a Lee backer. Like back in the day when she was beating Ashley Evans Smith, Montana De La Rosa, I thought she had some legitimate upside to be a top 5, maybe even challenge for a title at some point. Absolutely, I do think she's shot now, but being shot in women's MMA is a lot more forgiving than being shot in men's, obviously. She looks slow. She looks stiff, sometimes a little aimless in her shot selection. Just not very sharp. It strikes me as age combined with maybe a lack of commitment, maybe lack of sparring or good training partners, or seeing the end of her career and not really, working as hard as she once did. But in this matchup, we're talking a women's striking fight, most likely, right? So I like Aldrich's technical skills, but she's not a punishing fighter. She's not powerful. She's not particularly quick. She's certainly not athletic. She's not very high volume. She's not a very good offensive wrestler. I like her defensive wrestling, but like, where is she going to get a consistent edge in this fight? It's going to be close. I'm very confident. Like, the numbers will be close. And more likely than not, she'll probably edge it just by being a little sharper and well drilled, a little tighter to the target, a bit more direct. But so earlier in the week, I wanted nothing to do with this. I actually did take Lee plus 185 for less than a unit. That's like 35% implied. Again, for a female striking fight where I know the judges are more than likely going to be in play, I can give her low 40s here, I think. I don't think it's 50-50. I would lean Aldrich, but I don't know, somewhere between 40 and 45% sounds more accurate to me. And just here's one thing from like a gambling perspective, right, that I noticed, which was a little weird, using like Bet Online as the standard. And I think this is telling a lot. So the -3.5 for Aldrich is a big, it's a, I'm sorry, the +3.5 for Lee is something like, -250 or something like that. So the consensus expectation is she's going to take a round. She's the favorite to land more takedowns. She's the favorite to land more significant strikes, modestly on both of these, but the favorite nonetheless. And ends by split is -350, which is as close as you ever see a fight be, right? So I just don't see the upside for Aldrich in this matchup to justify a -200 plus. I don't hate Lee at +185. It looks like the lines come in quite a bit, though. That's a little bit more accurate to me.
Man, that's such an interesting point. I can't recall somebody being an underdog in a fight, but being the favorite to land more takedowns and the favorite to land more significant strikes. Like that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, like how that works.
Yeah, even like take a look at this. I'm not a huge stats guy, but I do reference them. Like the Montana De La Rosa versus Aldrich. I was on Aldrich there. I think the consensus was that she kind of cruised. I didn't see it that way. That was a nip and tuck, no damage being done, low volume, not a ton of clean striking. Statistically, each round it could not have been closer. Aldrich landed the more effective strikes, and she got an edge. She probably won 3-0, but it was close as hell. And Andrea Lee versus Montana De La Rosa, when it was standing, was close as hell in the rematch as well. It's going to be a close fight. +185 doesn't seem too bad to me.
No, I know. I think you make a lot of good arguments there. I especially after listening to that, I would not want to be on the chalk side in this type of fight.
Yeah.
All right. We got Lucas Almeida versus Danny Silva. Go ahead, Mr. Blonde. How are you looking at this one?
I was never really compelled by the money line. Like I would make Silva the favorite for sure. Why is that? We've seen Almeida lose in a variety of ways, right? Like completely grapple fucked versus Sabatini. He fought very timidly before getting aired out by Feely, who put on quite an impressive performance last week. Just put that out there. And versus Zellhuber on Contender Series, he came out hard, had a good round one, kind of tired, showed a lot of damage in 2 and 3. Good bounce back versus Kwamba, but he still looks really, really susceptible to right hands to me. And when you show he can lose in the ways that he has, I'm a little bit more doubtful of him than Silva, and Silva's not airtight either, but he is aggressive. He's violent. Both guys like to come forward. Neither's looking to rest. It doesn't look to me like Almeida has the footwork or the temperament of somebody like Kulabau, who's able to kind of strike conservatively and keep it moving and kind of catch and pot shot Silva coming in. So I think it's going to be fire on fire. Will they eat each other's best stuff for 15 minutes? That's possible. Folks have done that with Silva before, especially that guy Pacheco on the Contender Series. He must have ate 200 clean shots. So Silva doesn't look like a light hitter to me, but he's not getting knockouts easily either. They can both crack enough that I like this to not go the distance. I just don't see a lot of stalling. I see it being violent. I see both wanting to come forward. I see Almeida being susceptible to right hands. And I see him being able to potentially catch Silva coming in with something bigger and more damaging and punishing that any of Silva's recent opponents were able to do. So I like the under 2.5 near evens. I like doesn't go the distance as well, though it's gotten kind of chalky now. When I played it early, admittedly. But in an evenish number, modest juice, I think those two are okay. What about you?
So to me, Silva, there's nothing really special about the guy, but he's just younger in his athletic prime, and there's nothing bad about him either. I mean, he seems like he's good everywhere, pressure striker, decent hardware, grappling doesn't seem to be a massive hole. My thing with Lucas Almeida is I don't really know where he's at, just given that, I mean, I felt pretty good about him after like the Trezano fight, his performance against Zellhuber. Just a pretty solid Muay Thai striker, doesn't make too many mistakes. But man, that Feely fight to me, I think I had bet scorecards no action on Almeida, and I could see within 20 seconds of the fight starting that I had made a horrendous wager because he just looked so stiff, so slow. And I was like, yeah, this guy's getting knocked out, and he got knocked out. So after a performance like that, at the age that he's at, with the amount of fights that he's had, I'm not dying to jump in and start buying his stock. To me, I could see how you get to the under. It feels to me like one of those fights where it's going to be like really tilting, where they're going crazy, but they're just durable enough and crafty enough to make it over. And maybe Danny Silva not quite aggressive enough to get him out of there. But yeah, I don't know. I would say Danny Silva round 2 or round 3 knockout. I don't think those are great prices though. Yeah, nothing crazy there.
Yeah, those are kind of consensus. I was eyeing that up myself, some sort of attritional stoppage. But again, I would expect collisions here. I would. If they take it for 15 minutes, I'll eat that. What I don't love when I'm betting it over is a lot of stalling, right? And it looks like, their temperaments are to strike and to do damage. Silva, when he gets a takedown, a knockdown, he's looking to finish the fight. He's not looking to lay in guard and recover for a couple of minutes. So I tend to think it'll be action-packed. If that doesn't yield a stoppage, I'll eat the loss. But yeah, I think it'll be violent.
No, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Ricardo Ramos, Chepe Mariscal. I don't have a bet here. It feels kind of dog or pass in the sense that I think that the run that Mariscal's been on has been pretty soft competition-wise. Like he's fighting a lot of bums. I mean, guys like Trevor Peak, right? I mean, he hasn't really fought somebody quite on the level of Ramos. So skill for skill, I would feel like a really obvious spot to play a dog here, skill for skill. But then you have to calculate the fact how flaky he is. I mean, this guy tapping the guillotines left and right, gassing out. It feels like at the beginning of the fight, Ramos is going to be competitive, maybe find a back take or a takedown. Like I can't get out of my head Sean Soriano just rinsing Chepe on the mat. Like that. It did happen a long time ago. And there could be a million factors for that, but he did get rinsed on the mat by Sean Soriano. So is it out of the question that somebody like Ricardo Ramos could take him down, take his back, and do some work? I don't think that's crazy to think. But in terms of a prediction, I would say that ultimately Chepe is able to use his just solid grappling decision making to find top position. He's the better positional grappler than Ramos, and he's got the better pace. So I think he probably wins a decision, but putting it on Ramos in round 3 would be my guess. Maybe a 29-28. I think in round 1, it could be difficult for Chepe. Just he's a little bit of a range disadvantage. When he's fresh, there's a lot you got to worry about with Ramos. He's throwing spinning back elbows. He's throwing right hands. He's darting in and out. He's throwing calf kicks. So I could see it being a fight where Chepe maybe has to work his way into it and maybe opens up a live betting opportunity as well. But yeah, no bet for me. I'm not dying to take the dog shot on a guy as flaky as Ramos. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. It wasn't one that I looked into a ton because I know kind of like a weakness, a trouble spot for me in the way I bet is I can get lured in on a dog who I've seen in with decent competition at a nice juicy number like this. I know for certainty that Mariscal Chepe is he's a lot more rugged than Ramos. And sometimes it just comes down to that. If the going gets tough, who's going to prevail? Who's going to be more resilient? I'm pretty sure that's Chepe, right? Ramos tapping the guillotines, like you mentioned, a jiu-jitsu black belt. Undeniably, he's got good skills there. He's tapping the guillotines on more than one occasion. Unveiled a new weakness versus Coulibaly. He's getting his leg torn up by low kicks. I just expect Chepe to make it rough, make it physical, and Ramos to probably see the exit at some point. Is he training with Fight Nerds now? Did I see that on social media somewhere? I think you're on mute, bro. Are you on mute or am I just not hearing you?
My bad, I'm muted. Yeah, I think he is at Fighting Nerds, but man, it seems like people love to ignore all the bad people at Fighting Nerds. All the Bruna Brazils of the world and the other guys who have been Oh, here we got it confirmed. Narrative Nation. Yes, he's at Fighting Nerds. Yeah. All right.
It's just a spot that I know I could throw some dollars at it. Is it tempting? Is it probably the side? He probably is. I'd rather not mess with it. If he wins, good for him. Good for him. Odds reset. I'll probably bet against him at a better price on another day. But I had him over Kulabau. I felt like a total ass pull. Again, he's got some things going for him. There's no doubt about that. Just putting it together, being tough, resilient over 15 versus a guy that, even on the regionals, he fought some good dudes. Did he have some bad performance there? He did. Again, the Soriano fight you referenced 5 years ago at this point. But, man, that Charrier fight, tough dude, man. A great competitor. I think I'd expect him to prevail in this one, but Dogger pass.
He just doesn't feel like the type of guy whose skill set should really be minus 500 in the UFC too often. Even though his record looks great in the UFC so far, it's been kind of a easy run. Yeah, Myra Buena Silva, another one. There are a few bums at Fighting Nerds that people like to not mention. All right, we got Austin Lane taking on Mario Pinto. I actually laid the chalk here. I laid minus 350-ish on Pinto. It's pretty self-explanatory. To me, Austin Lane is easily the worst heavyweight in the division currently right now. I laid minus 200 on Justin Tafa against this guy. So it kind of puts into perspective where I have him in the general power rankings of the division. He's got no cardio. He's got no chin. If you can say anything positive about Austin Lane, it's that, he's a big athletic man, former NFL player for the Jaguars. He's got that football style double leg. But against Despain, to me, Despain clearly had no idea what he was doing in terms of MMA. Like, the guy is a Taekwondo fighter. When he was getting clinched up by Waldo Cortez, even, he pretty clear to me, he had no idea what a whizzer is, no idea what an underhook is, no idea the first idea of how to butt scoot and get up against the fence. There was no urgency to get up at all. So I think the market's putting a little bit of stock into that performance, and granted, maybe his chin looked a little bit better, Austin Lane. He was able to take a few shots off of Despain that I didn't expect him to be able to take here. But to me, this fight, it doesn't even really come down to the chin. Like, it's really like a cardio thing and the grappling. So I look at Pinto, and to me, I actually like a lot of what I see. He's 26 years old, looks to be a really athletic guy at this size, which, just like Taliesin Teixeira a few weeks ago, whenever I see a guy this big and athletic, it's just not too often you see them taking up MMA over other sports. So it's already got me intrigued. Then you see that he can sit behind a calf kick. He can counter wrestle. He can shoot offensively himself. He's got 15 minutes of cardio. He's got some experience in the sense that he's fought 3 guys in one night. He's fought against Olympic wrestler before. And in that fight, when he got taken down, on a run the pipe single leg, to me, his instincts looked great. He was popping right back up onto all fours, didn't spend any time on his back whatsoever. Looks like he's really had good wrestling fundamentals drilled into him at his camp in London, I believe he trains. And then it just, in terms of the UFC agenda here, it couldn't really be much more clear. Like, the UFC they don't care about Austin Lane at all, 0%. And to me, I think they see the same thing that I see in Pinto. They see a guy who 4 years from now could potentially be one of the ranked heavyweights. And if there was any knock on Pinto, to me, it's that he was a bit overly patient, and he would just he had fights where he could have definitely finished the guy, but he took him the decision. Just, he's happy to win on points. But on Contender Series, to me, it looked like he was starting to kind of fight a bit more aggressively. He stepped on the front foot, stepped on the gas, got a finish. And we see it all the time. These guys who at age 23, 24, 25, they're passive. They're still trying to figure out their spots to implement their power. But then by age 26, 27, 28, those same guys are finishing people left and right. So what are you thinking here, Mr. Blum?
Yeah, I think your price is good. I do think I think he's a talented young guy that's built a little bit different than other young heavies you see coming in by way of Contender Series. He's big, and he's calm, and he's athletic. That calm detail, that there's some positives to that, but he can be really, really passive in spots that I think a lot of folks probably noted in his regional tape. Even Contender Series, you mentioned him being on the front foot, it still looks pretty passive to me, man. Just for a primary striker, there's not a lot of moments in his tape of him really sitting down and looking to put it on guys in an assertive, aggressive way, which I think he's probably capable of. Instead, he plays it a little bit more energy efficient. He's calm. He's cool. Even if he gets that KO, it's like it was just another day. Nothing that's unexpected to him. The defensive wrestling get-ups seem okay as well. And one of the fights that I think I saw in the regionals. So I like him here. I'd be surprised if Lane beat him. Lane, to me, is just a big, warm body. He'll test you a little bit, especially if you're inept in the wrestling, grappling department, or if you lack physicality entirely. But he's not long for the UFC. I think your minus 350 is probably good. Before I even looked at it, price was gone. The logical thing I think to look at, and a lot of folks I think on Discord and all that have mentioned it, is maybe that over 1.5 near evens. It looks like it's gotten bid up a little bit, but from a minute perspective, like when this fight starts, unless Lane is just throwing himself into the fire and making it really aggressive and physical, it seems like it'll probably be tepid if Pinto has its way. Again, he just doesn't really step on the gas much. But again, it could still end in a flash, right? Like nothing about his Contender Series fight told me that was going to end when it did. But again, just one little pop on the button, an arm punch, check left hook, and down the guy went. Like that was, pretty strong reaction to that shot. It was well placed, well timed, and then a pretty aggressive quick finish from there. So I think that over 1.5 will probably look good until maybe it doesn't. And Lane can get caught. Absolutely. He is chinny. He's been stopped in the first round several times. So I haven't messed with it. I get the play, though. What do you think about that?
Yeah, pace-wise, it makes a lot of sense just because he is generally really negative in his fights, Pinto. Like he's not going to be pushing it. And I don't really see much of a finish for Lane. I mean, even in the Spain fight, he just laid in guard, didn't really show much hope of passing, much hope of landing too much ground and pound. And one last point that I would want to make is in the Denise fight, to me, it was really concerning the fact that he's able to land a takedown against Denise, who is a 0 on bottom. We've kind of learned through his later fights. But the fact that he got so tired doing absolutely nothing in round 1 on top of Denise laid in guard, accepted bottom position, didn't try to get up, did nothing. And by round 2, Lane had absolutely nothing, and all of his takedowns were slow, getting stuffed. I see something similar happening here. I don't think he's going to get as much top time in round 1 as he did against Denise. I think he could land a takedown. I think Pinto will work his way up and probably stuff a couple shots against the fence. And then I do think he will get the finish round 2 or 3. I think just the combination of the chin of Lane and he's going to be so damn tired once some of the wrestling stops going his way. He's going to.
He gets tired. He's not a natural player. So he's not somebody who's done this since he was 5 years old. That's cool in the face of composure and getting hit and wrestles smoothly or energy efficiently. He's just not that guy. He's got into the sport too late, and it kind of shows. And I think that's probably the root of that. That's why he's not comfortable anywhere. So it's probably breathing. It's just lack of experience, right? He looks in shape, right, compared to most heavies anyway. But I don't like the way his game is put together. Strong enough, physical, athletic guy, but that only takes you so far. He's got a place to be like fodder for up-and-comers and stuff like this. But, yeah, not high on Lane, and it wouldn't shock me if he got ended in 30 seconds or 14 minutes into the fight. I think it'll happen at some point. So, 1.5, like I said, from a pacing perspective, and like you agreed with, I think it'll probably look good until maybe it doesn't. So I'm laying off it. No play for me in the fight.
Cool. All right. Danny Barlo, Sam Patterson. Do you like anything here?
Not really. It's come in a lot, right? So that was another one kind of like Ramos and Mariscal, where for the levels that they're at, Patterson and Barlo, I'd expect a more tightly lined fight. Patterson was plus 250, plus 270 at points in the week. And that's historically a place I can get lured in very easily to throw a small bet down, right? He's a good fighter, a good submission grappler. But Barlo's just much more of a unit, physically imposing, fast, strong, harder hitting. His defensive wrestling looks okay enough to me. That's what it comes down to. Is Patterson going to be able to get him down to impose his grappling? I think that answer is probably no. A lot of times Patterson gets his grappling work done when somebody's really physical with him, or somebody dives into one of his front headlocks, or he sweeps somebody from bottom. I don't think Barlow's going to play that game with him. He'll be looking to strike and when they're striking. I think Barlo just has a lot more to gain than lose with somebody like Patterson. I don't hate Patterson as a fighter. So again, it was kind of tough for me to lay off plus 250, plus 270, but I didn't bite. Now it's closer. I'm still not overly interested in it. What about you?
So as prospects, I've had Barlow rated a whole lot higher, just in the sense that his upside to me is pretty damn high. I mean, athleticism wise, physicality wise, hardware wise, like he's got a lot to like. And in his last fight, I believe it was round 1 when he had a pretty bad break in his forearm, so in his left hand as well. So I think that definitely plays a role in that fight going as competitive as it did with Veretennikov.
Yeah.
So it could potentially be some buy low on Barlow here. I mean, the way that Patterson strikes, like I obviously, I think everybody could look at the tape and see that there's a really good chance he gets knocked out here. The way his chin is hanging up in the air, he's not particularly durable. He's willing to strike with guys that he probably shouldn't strike with.
Yeah.
And then his offensive wrestling to me doesn't look particularly good. His jiu-jitsu looks very good. His jiu-jitsu looks quite good. When he's getting the back, he looks like a smooth operator. His Darce chokes look amazing. A lot of his transitions look really deadly on the ground. Yeah. So if he does get on the back of Danny Barlow, I all of a sudden want absolutely nothing to do with the Danny Barlow chalk anymore, because I could see him getting choked out. I could see him getting finished. He's getting put in some really tough spots in the regional scene, nearly choked out before. Could definitely see something like that happening, but I don't clearly envision how it gets there. It feels like he's going to try and shoot for takedowns, and the more athletic guy is going to be able to stuff him and then put his left hand on him enough to either knock him out or win the fight. So to me, the prices seem fine. Like the better prospect is favored, but underdog definitely has some ways to win. So I think seeing that relatively similar.
I agree.
All right. William Gomis, Haider Emil. I kind of like Gomis decision here. Let me check the price to see if it hasn't changed too much from the last time that I looked. But generally, Haider Emil seems like a super durable guy, good cardio, kind of making his entire game around his physicality. Yeah, Gomis decision right around like even money, minus 115, minus 105, minus 110. I don't think that's bad. I mean, against a guy like Brito, I mean, that's a pretty good indicator of how he's going to be able to handle somebody as aggressive as Haider Emil. And he handled it really well. I mean, all those guys from the MMA factory camp, they all fight really similarly. The Sirogan, Nasruddin Imavov, they got that outside, springy on the tip of your toes type of style. And for someone like Haider, I think that's really difficult. Like I was considering laying the chalk on the Korean Tiger last time out. I didn't, just because the guy gets into a bit of, gets into firefights. He stands there. He's willing to get hit. Versus here, Gomis is definitely not willing to get hit at all. If there's anything you could say about him, he wants a clean fight. He wants to skirt around on the outside, touch and not get touched. And I think that's going to work here, just because I think there's a big enough skill gap. So could it have some dicey moments where Haider, clipping him just from being so aggressive and having no regard for his own safety, potentially. But I think more often than not, it's William Gomis just having a skill advantage, too many weapons, the side kicks, being able to mix in the takedowns. And I don't even really know how good Haider's cardio is. Like on Contender Series, it was an insane pace, but it got really sloppy. And then in other fights, it seems like he's the one just pushing the pace while the other guys break. So I'm not sure where his cardio is, but I think there's enough of a skill gap where I could say it should be a bit wider on the Gomis decision. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer that Gomis got that decision versus Brito that I think he probably didn't deserve. He fought well, and he counted himself fine, but I thought Brito probably won that fight. If he's looking at an L here, maybe we get a more playable line, just because folks are very results oriented. I think bettors are. A lot of people don't like Gomis, whatever you want to call him. I've always thought he was pretty decent, right? Like he's not that easy to strike with, and I think he's kind of underrated from a physical perspective. He's kind of a handful, right? Between the fast kicks, the nice frame for the division, he's mobile and can shut down action, can hold his own in the clinch. I think he's a tough matchup for a lot of folks, and I think he's a tough matchup for Emil. The one thing about Gomi, a lot of folks do fall into his they get hypnotized a little bit, and they kind of fall into a low volume affair where, they get a little bit frozen on the outside, or they try to make it really physical with them, and it backfires from over wrestling and not accomplishing anything, possibly getting reversed. Emil is I think say what you want about him skill-wise, he is a rugged guy, definitely a tough dude. In that regard, maybe he throws himself into the fire in a way that other opponents really haven't, and makes something happen that turns the decision bet, or makes it scary at least. Either he accomplishes something, hits pay dirt on something big, maybe even walks into something bad himself. Like Gomis he's considered kind of like a weasel, kind of a non-damaging sort, but the kicks look pretty fast and hard to me. I wouldn't be surprised if Emil walked into something there. I do like Gomi to win the fight. I don't love the price. I was hoping something would change midweek, and we might get him at minus 160, maybe minus 170. At minus 220, I'm not interested. I don't want to play a minus number on decision, though I think that's the most likely scenario, like you said. Emil's tough guy for sure. I respect his game as hell. Will bring it. I hope he brings it here and brings a different side of Gomi out. I like Gomi to win. No play for me.
Sweet. All right. Nasrat Haqparast versus Esteban Ribovic. Anything you like on this one?
Yeah, pre-tape, you look at it. Are these guys not very comparable level? And are they both primary strikers? Minus 250 earlier in the week, minus 300. That seems awfully wide to me for this type of fight. I can get to favoring Ribovic. He's likely going to come forward. I keep using the word rugged, but he is that. Nasrat's last fight, I don't want to say he wilted. He still pumped out a lot of volume. He backed up throughout, and that's to Jared Gordon, who's, he's a fine striker, an underrated fighter, and a well-rounded guy, certainly. I was a little bit surprised to see him walking down Nasrat and doing as well striking as he did. I thought Nasrat would have a pronounced speed advantage there. If you told me that Nasrat was going to defend 12 or 13 takedowns, whatever it was, he certainly accomplished that, but he was getting worn on in the striking department. He showed some bad optics. He was moving backwards throughout. It was a very, very close fight. It could have went either way. I thought I would have probably edged that to Gordon. Ribovic also had a close fight with Zellhuber. I would have thought Zellhuber would have had some advantages heading into that fight. I don't think Zellhuber fought his best fight. I don't know if he was kind of overly excited by the big Mexican movement of the sphere and everything that was going on there. But, he stayed in the pocket far too much. He did not use his range weapons and kind of defensive. Not that he's great defensively, he's not, but with his length and ability to move, I thought he could have definitely fought a better, smarter fight than that. But Ribovic is getting well pumped up off that result. I think that's partially deserved. He's certainly tough. He's got weapons. He is rugged. But there's a lot not to like about him, too. I don't see this guy surging into the top 15. Certainly nothing bigger than that. He's offensive-minded, but he's very hittable. You can take him down. He's going to battle you for as long as he's in the fight. And he's going to have come forward optics here, right? He's going to keep bringing it. I think he's a little bit less likely to get tired. I can see favoring him. Minus 300 made no sense to me. I got in at Nasrat. I got a little bit less than a unit at, I think it was plus 250. Yeah, I got Haqparast at plus 250. I think from a levels perspective, these guys are very comparable. When the round one bell rings, I think Haqparast probably has a modest edge with his experience, ability to mobile. I think he's a little quicker and straight to the target. Ribovic, perhaps a little bit more dangerous, clearly more dangerous. And just a little bit more rugged, probably gets an edge in a high volume, really fun fight. I cannot see minus 300. I can't even see minus 250. Minus 150 or so, that makes more sense to me. As a pick, I think Ribovic wins, but I absolutely think Haqparast is in this fight. I totally think it's winnable. And I think it was a pretty easy play at those bigger plus 200 numbers. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you make some good points regarding the money line. The way I'm looking to attack the fight, though, I agree with you about one dynamic. It's that Ribovic really is the one bringing the danger to the fight here. I rate Ribovich's durability incredibly high. I mean, just look at the size of the guy's head. I mean, he's got this massive skull for this tiny man. Great cardio. I mean, the way he pushed through against Zell Huber was pretty insane. Like just the pace, the amount of haymakers he's throwing, and not slowing down too much at all. I like him in general. I don't like him on the money line here, but if I'm looking to play the fight, I'm looking for either a scorecards no action prop on Ribovic, just in that I think the win equity for Nasrat here is vastly decision. I think his path is to outbox Esteban, land the cleaner shots to a decision. I don't really see a finish at a high clip, because even if he does land the perfect shot on Ribovic has great cardio, great chin, as I mentioned, and he's got survivability off of his back. He can sit on his back, settle into guard, try and play the Kimura trap game, recover half guard. I view him as just being a guy who'd be really difficult to get out of there completely. So either the scorecards no action or just Ribovic's distance. What was that?
The no scorecards bet. How's that price? I gotta assume Ribovic is a pretty good favorite there.
Let me see. I know the inside the distance is a bit better than 2-1, which on my math, I feel like at worst it should be like plus 200. So I think anything better than plus 200 on Ribovic to win inside the distance is plus EV. Let's see.
Minus 275. Hack Barass. He is hittable though. It hasn't been cracked yet. It's not out of the question he could, but no, I think Ribovic is a lot more likely to finish.
If people could shop though, if they could get like the minus 215 at FanDuel, I think that's good. I can't see the DraftKings price. I would definitely play that. I probably will have. I'll certainly have some of that minus 215 myself. It feels pretty. I'm not going to say a free roll. Obviously, Nasrat can crack, but I really do rate the survivability of Ribovic. It feels like it'd have to be something weird to get him out of there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think if Nasrat wins, it's probably points. Ribovic could knock him out. If it's 15 minutes of striking, it's probably closely contested. Ribovic, more impact, more damage coming forward, probably edges it. It looks like Hack Barass plus 3.5 is minus 130. That doesn't look too bad to me.
I feel like the best proxy for this fight, like the most comparable matchup to me, is the Dober versus Hack Barass fight, which eventually Dober, with enough pressure, was able to find an opening and land the kill shot. So like that's kind of where my head is going. It just feels like Hack Barass is going to be real competitive, and then in a big flurry where maybe he starts slowing down a little bit. Caught.
Yeah, that could happen. That could happen, but I would think more renditions than not. This is a tough, high volume striking fight where Hack Barass has an edge early and Ribovic kind of turns the tide mid to late. If it goes a distance 3-0, I don't think Ribovic has shown the kind of comprehensive 15-minute style to dominate a guy like Hack Barass. Could finish him, yes, more likely to finish him. So that's where I think it gets spoiled. But if this goes to the cards, I'm not expecting 30-27.
I like this Pepe. Could be. Knocks him down in round one. Yeah, this would be ideal for me, Moise. I'm gonna be rooting for that. I'm rooting for Hack Barass to crack him in round one, drop him, and then I get a chance to bet Ribovic at dog money. I would love that. All right, next fight. This is my Super Bowl. This is my fight of the night. This is what I do this stuff for. The fights I live for. Cody Brundage versus Julian Marquez, co-main event. Full transparency, I have bet against Cody Brundage now 10 fights in a row.
Wow.
10 fights in a row. There's never been another fighter that I've been like this. 10 fights in a row. And I believe I'm negative. I'm certainly negative over those 10 fights. Granted, I don't regret any of them. I literally don't regret any of those fades. I would do them all again with maybe even a bigger bet sizing. But this guy, Cody Brundage, to me, man, I don't like to talk bad about fighters. But But if I was going to talk bad about any fighter, it would be Cody Brundage, man. Like this guy, like Jacob Malkoun, the way he got himself out of the cage in that fight, Razak Al Hassan, the way he got himself out of the cage there. If I just go through his resume real quick, I mean, we start back. He gets reversed and finished by William Knight, right? Gets a takedown, panics, gets reversed and finished by William Knight. Fights Nick Maximov, has his moments, but gets rinsed in the wrestling. Fights Dalcha Lungiambola, gets destroyed up until he jumps guillotine, out of his ass. The next fight, Tresean Gore destroying him, looks like he's about to break, lands an overhand, puts Tresean Gore to sleep. Fair play. Lord Mikal gets a takedown, panics, ends up on bottom, gets finished. Adolfo Vieira has his moments, drops him twice, starts panicking, jumps guillotine against the ADCC world champion, gets finished. Cedric Dumas gets a takedown, panics, jumps guillotine, ends up on bottom, does nothing the whole fight. Malkoun quit. Reese slammed him on his head. Bo Nickel Al Hassan. And that's his entire UFC career, which comes out to 4-5-1 somehow. But I'm going back to the well, man. I got reverse CLV'd here.
How bad?
I laid -145. And I would have happily laid -180, -190. I think this is closer to 70%, in my opinion. Obviously, Cody has a path. Like Marquez, his chin could be completely dust, and Cody's fairly quick. He swings overhands. He could land hard early. But outside of him landing a big overhand in a wild exchange, if this turns into a fight at any point, there's one guy who wants to be in the cage, who actually wants to continue fighting in the UFC, whether his body's abandoning him or not. He's a real fighter. He's beaten real people. He's survived grappling fights before. And the other guy wants out of there. As soon as he gets hit, he's already thinking about his long-term CTE and how he can get out of the cage as fast as possible. I don't want to take up all the talking points. Mr. Blonde, what do you think about this fight?
As of what time is it? It is now 3:17. We've had the odds flip, and Julian Marquez is now the dog to Cody Brundage in this fight. I got reverse CLV too. I took a 2-unit play at -138, which I thought was more than fair. I never personally like to feel too good about bet on a fight between two jerky fighters and can't be too surprised if something jerky happens. But I added to it, on the dip. I might have to add to it again, but I'm a little bit overexposed to Marquez. Nothing huge, but I think I got almost maybe 2.5, maybe 3 units on him now. Like you said, man, I think Marquez is more of a fighter's fighter. It's been a couple of years, a couple of fights since he's clawed from behind, but he has done that against, I would say, better fighters than Brundage, man. The Darren Stewart fight was come from behind. Maki Pitolo, Phil Hawes. He's a fighter, man. Is he tight around the details? No. Can he be taken down? Yes. Can he be hit? Could his chin go? Yeah. So, Brundage has a path. Would I be surprised if he, blew him up early? It's possible, but the guy can take a beating. Gregory Rodriguez is a very, very potent, formidable offensive fighter. He was swinging hammers with that guy up until the point he got laid out. He had a good round 1 versus Barrio. Barrio in a striking fight, a lot of times his cardio will prevail. It did there. And, Marquez wilted in the face of it pretty quick. It wasn't the best look. One shot versus Reese, not great. I have no delusions about him being, a lock. If people are looking for locks, I don't think Marquez is a lock. But in terms of a strong position to put your money, you got to be willing to do it. I wouldn't expect to have this much money on Marquez at this stage, but he trains with good folks. I like that he's calm and cool. He's come back in fights from before. Brundage does the exact opposite, you could see the wheels spinning in his head, man. He's not comfortable in there. He doesn't love what he's doing. He's got some ability, right? He can wrestle a little bit. He can get Marquez down. I don't think he's finishing or doing big things on top. And that's what gives me some confidence, right? If they duke it out early and they're just, like I say, dick swinging, I think Cody is a little bit quicker and more likely to land something that, turns the fight on its head quickly. But if he goes to wrestling, which is his typical bread and butter, I think Marquez gets up. I don't think he's getting subbed. And eventually he turns the tide. If Brundage starts shooting tired takedowns, Marquez has a couple of decent weapons to combat that and pull the quit out of him, I think, whether it be his front choke series or his front headlock series, or he's got pretty decent clinch weapons too. So, if Brundage is tired and, going low and trying to clinch up, I think it eventually, I think the tide gets turned on him and he probably gets finished. So, again, not a lock. I don't think it's the bet of the year. I think you're probably a little bit more confident in him than I. I wanted every bit of that minus 138 to start getting involved here. I've only added because of the price going against me. I think that's a good spot. I think minus 160 or so is fair. I like him here. Not a ton else to share. I think it's a character thing. I think it's a resilience thing. I think Marquez is more of a fighter's fighter, and I think that's what will ultimately get his hand raised unless Brundage pulls another fast one and manages to turn a prone position on the ground into a DQ winner, no contest.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think the place where looking at these odds, the place where I really disagree with the market is they're giving these guys equal chances to win a decision, like equal, both around the same price to win a decision. I mean, how many times do we have to, like, I've just been hearing the same people for the last number of years, every single Cody Brundage fight week. This is the time he's going to show that he can wrestle for 15 minutes. This, like, his opponent can't stuff takedowns. He's going to land them so easy. It's Cedric Dumas. He's going to land takedowns. It's Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. He can't grapple. I've heard this a million times. And unless you're just the biggest flake ever who, upon getting taken down, is going to tap to a guillotine or get mounted and pounded out, I got to think at some point, like you said, the tide's going to turn. As soon as one thing goes wrong for Cody, he's going to be in a whole world of shit. I mean, Marquez, if you can say anything about him, like when he's fought these gassy grapplers, like I think you made some really good comparisons, like the Maki Pasolo fight, the Phil Hawes fight. Like those are fights where he had to get off of his back a few times. He's getting taken down and fighting his way back in. I think it's going to be either round 2 or 3 after both guys get a bit tired and sloppy. One of those takedowns by Brundage is going to fail, and I think he gets choked out. I'll say Marquez, Anaconda, round 2.
I could see it. I thought the sub prop might be more enticing than it is, but it seems like everybody's all over that. It's not attractive at all.
Yeah,
the one Brundage performance, the one that just, again, maybe you forgive one of the back of the head shot performances. I personally don't. I hate that kind of shit. But the Dumas fight, man, that was like, man, that was as bad a performance as you'll see. That was just,
it was disgraceful. It was pitiful.
Yeah,
whatever word you want to use, it was just horrible to watch.
It was. And again, he's had his moments. He's done a couple of things, right? He got released off the armbar, and he was messing up Vieira and round. He could do some things. He got some ability. I'm not going to say he's like complete shit, but I think between the ears he's a little bit lacking. I think that's obvious. I'll take Marquez here. Again, if people are looking for lock of the night, it seems like that's your biggest pick. It's my biggest play of the card. Again, 2 jerky fighters. Don't be surprised if something jerky happens. But from a strength of position, this current minus 102, I think that's very attractive. I haven't heard a great Brundage case for all this theme to have happened. I'm sure some folks are on him. If you're thinking 15 minutes of lay and pray, I'm buying that. Catching him early, perhaps. Not buying a guillotine. I don't know. I would love to hear a really good Brundage take because I haven't heard it yet.
This is the Brundage take right here we're seeing in the chat. It's all these things about Marquez. It's like, is Marquez an alcoholic? Is he done training? And if there was the biggest thing that concerns me in this fight, honestly, is like I gotta have some level of respect for the market. Not in that, oh, they're looking at the tape and seeing some sort of secret angle from Cody Brundage that I'm not seeing here. I'm not really worried about that. It's more that I know there are people who have more information regarding the MMA lab than I do, and I've heard some rumblings that maybe Marquez hasn't looked amazing in camp and whatnot. But to me, it kind of comes down to he could be drunk, he could be high, he could be injured. I still am going to bet a guy who wants to be in the cage against a guy who doesn't want to be in the cage. I mean, John Jones is an alcoholic, right? So at the end of the day, the fighters matter more than all the narratives.
I agree. I agree, man. I think that's what it comes down to. I think it's a character thing more than anything else. What we'll see how it goes. Again, is he going to exploit an alcohol advantage here? I don't think so, man. I think it was who was it? In one of the discords that I'm in, and I feel bad for not giving credit, but you hear him responding to interviewers, man, Brundage that is, and it's like every excuse in the book and mental philosophy, and he's just going through his head, man. Marquez, yeah, I lost a couple fights, back in the gym, on to the next. I just, I'm not a big like narrative, but I think that's kind of meaningful here. There's a guy that like let's shit roll off his shoulders versus somebody who's very much the opposite of that. So maybe walking papers after this one. Again, minus 102. Again, not calling it lock of the night, but I think that's a strong position.
Yeah, somebody's getting the walking papers, that's for sure. As far as live bet, I think it makes a lot of sense because if Brundage does have round one a decent clip, I mean, if he does have a good round one, I'm gonna want a live bet. So. Yeah. We'll see. It's going to be a volatile round one, that's for sure. They're going to be swinging with not a lot of defense going on.
Probably.
I could see this for sure. And yeah, John Jones, the GOAT. All right. Main event. We got Manel Kape taking on Asu Almabayev. Mr. Blonde, what are you thinking here?
I don't have a play, so I'll try to be brief. I've been maybe slightly more bearish than consensus on both of these guys. Kape, obviously the guy's like, he's super talented, right? He's really, really athletic. He's got speed. He's got power. He's got foot speed. His defensive wrestling seems to have come a long way since the Ryzen days. But man, oh man, ultimately it comes down to results and consistency of performances, right? The guy's had 8 UFC fights. You got to say he's been hot and cold. He's laid eggs, and some folks are very forgiving because they'll turn in a great performance against the right kind of matchup. Absolutely, he's capable of that. Maybe he does that here. But man, I'm not super forgiving about his crummy performances. These are winnable fights that he's just not doing enough in, So playing him at a minus 200 number against a guy who's probably going to shoot a lot of takedowns, I doubt he's going to be very, very comfortable fighting Kape on the feet for extended periods of time. Again, how much, there was so much vitriol heading into that fight with Mikhaev, right? Mikhaev, I would certainly rate his grappling, his wrestling, and pace better than Almabayev's. But man, oh man, like all that beef, he mostly gets, that fight was 85% striking. There was only like one segment in round 3 where Mikhaev actually got his control. This guy threw 48 strikes in 15 minutes, 48 significant strikes. That's 16 a round. Like, what are you going to accomplish with that? That at minus 200 plus, I just can't get excited about that. Do I think he's going to win? Yeah. Is he the more talented dude? Yeah. And I've been bearish on Almabayev too. I was pretty big on Nicolau over him. He couldn't get wrestling going at all. He pulled, that was probably 1-1. The round 1 he won was just a nothing round. He was a little bit more active in. Round 2, I thought Nicolau won that pretty handily. Then he gets that left hand right uppercut knockdown, and Nicolau didn't have much off his back, and he cruised to a 2-1 decision. I remember that guy being on the regionals, and, again, positional grappling goes a long way. I'll tell you what, I mentioned that in the Discord that we're a part of. I would have never thought this guy would have rose to the ranks of being a legitimate contender at 125 in the UFC. Again, he's not bad. He's got a good positional grappling game, and that goes far in most divisions, I guess. And I guess it certainly does in 125. I think Kape will win the fight. I think he's the far more talented guy, certainly the better striker. His defensive wrestling looks good enough to me, but is he going to be frozen, right, by the fear of the takedown? And then, again, 48 strikes is a joke. That is just that's not getting it done. What do you expect to accomplish on 48 strikes? But more likely than not, I think he gets it done. I think he'll stop the takedowns. If he stops the takedowns, even at a low pace, I think he gets the job done. What are your thoughts? But no play for me.
When I first saw the line, I was thinking I was going to play Almabayev, like 225, something like that. Just in that, like, you made a lot of good points. It's about when there's grappling involved, sometimes Kape's volume kind of gets suppressed. It seems to me like he's a bit worried about overextending himself and ending up on bottom. So he wants to just pick his spots with when he really explodes. So he went into like a 50-50 fight with Nicolau. Nicolau had like a pretty close to 50-50 fight with Almabayev. I mean, I could definitely see a world where these guys match up and it's super competitive, low volume type of affair where Kape's landing a few cleaner strikes, but Almabayev landing a few takedowns. That could definitely see that, and that's what made me lean towards the dog. And I still kind of lean towards dog or pass, just in that I don't really trust Kape at Big Chalk against legit competition. I mean, I had bet him in his first 2 UFC fights and was pretty disappointed, especially with the Nicolau one. It just felt like that fight was so winnable and there for him, and he didn't really assert himself quite enough. But then again, in his last fight, he looked absolutely amazing. He's got the gyno going on, so he's on like the absolute best stuff. He's not even caring about his post-cycle therapy. He's just jacking up his hormones. Got to respect that. I mean, so yeah, I think Kape.
You got a keen eye for gyno. I'll tell you what.
Hey man,
when it comes to nipples,
I judge the nipples really closely. Like, there's no, you're not going to get into the cage with gyno and me not notice it.
It doesn't sneak past it. But look at 5 wins. Again, it's just it's a little bit just wiki-cappy, but Pantoja, good fighter at the time that fight came out. He was not, of the position he's in today. Loss. Nicolau, very close fight. I thought Kape won that fight, but Nicolau, solid fighter, contender type. Loss. Wins over O'Day, Zalagas, Dvorak, Dos Santos, and Silva. Again, those guys are okay. That's UFC competition. None of those guys are surging up the ranks or going to compete for a title anytime soon. And then the loss to Makai, he's 5-3. Bad things happen to him. He doesn't do enough. So I can't get behind Kape at a big number. Almabayev, yeah, I would have to say it is dog or pass, but I'm not that compelled. I think Kape turns in a good performance and gets people excited about him. Keeps the excited people excited about him.
Yeah, I mean, Almabayev winning, it's just as simple as top time, right? I mean, he could have some striking success, although it's hard to imagine him doing really anything too significant outside of just setting up his takedowns. But is that what you kind of think an Almabayev win would just be more top time over 25 minutes? I guess so. Maybe a big moment or two. I would think, in a nothing fight, if both guys stare and both have shown the propensity to do that, the Nicolau fight for Almabayev was very scary. That round one was a nothing round one. Nothing happens. He pulls in some cage push, fails on some takedowns, but shuts down action. Maybe gets a takedown for 50 seconds. Judges, in a nip and tuck round where it's tough to judge the striking, it's very easy to give that to the guy who was initiating wrestling, being assertive, maybe got a takedown and got a little bit of top time. So I think it probably won't be a very good fight. If it's a good fight, I think Kape probably does something dazzling and impressive like he often does in the right kind of matchups. But if not, I think it probably ends up being close, either through the wrestling or just a negative striking fight where neither guy wants to really assert themselves for risk of messing up. What do you think about this right here? I mean, he did nearly rip Dvorak's shoulder apart. Do you think there's a world where there's a Kape sub here late in the fight?
I didn't really tape it with an eye towards Kape was going to be a major jiu-jitsu threat. It's possible. It would be somewhat surprising to me. You?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it could happen. I don't particularly. I think this fight goes the distance. Actually, I think Asu would be able to I think he's got good enough footwork, and then he's got the threat of the takedown. Obviously, Kape could finish anybody. He's like one of the more prolific finishers at this weight class, but I tend to think it goes the distance. Yeah, no, this is possible. Anytime there's going to be a guy grappling, getting tired, he could get finished any which way. That's certainly possible. Appreciate you, Dan. Yeah, everybody, if anybody who made it this far, hit a like button, subscribe. I really appreciate it. Shout out to Mr. Blonde. Thank you for doing this, bro. I mean, if you have anything to plug or anything you want to tell the people about, now would be the time.
No, not really, man. It's good to chat with you in this medium. A lot of buddies we have, mutual friends, probably seeing me for the first time. Shout out to all of you. You guys know how to reach me, Discord and whatnot. And I would say in most cards, I'd have more conviction and probably more enthusiasm and animation about plays that I have. This isn't my favorite card, 10 fights, not a super attractive one to me. There's nothing that I'm really pounding the table on. So hopefully we can do it again, and maybe I'll have some bolder takes for folks to eat up.
No, we'll definitely get you back on here again for a card that you're more fired up about. Thanks. You took this on short notice, so I really appreciate you. Thanks, everybody. We'll do it again. All right.
Appreciate you, brother. Take care, man.